In this video, we'll talk just a little bit about, what do we do to increase the benefits of multi-team membership? And I'm going to focus specifically on you as an individual. If you are in a situation where you have multiple team membership in your organization, and also you as a team leader. So thinking about if you are leading a team or more than one team in a team-based organization, what things you need to pay particular attention to beyond what we've already discussed about thinking about teams when we imagine teams are kind of stable with the same membership and not this sort of shared interdependence across teams. So if we first look at yourself, and if we look at ourselves, and if we have multiple team members, what are some things we should be thinking about? Well, one thing is to think about your own big picture. Be very, very concrete about your career goals and how each of the teams that you're sitting on can contribute to that. And that also can be part of thinking about, how can each of these help enhance your own knowledge base? How can each of these teams help you with your network and your capability to influence people? So when we talk about networks, and the textbook talks a little bit about networks in the way that we discuss them in leading others, one thing you want to be doing is making sure that you have a diverse network and that you find these brokerage positions or structural holes in the organization. And what that means is if you have some choice over which projects you join, you're going to be having this trade-off of, to some degree, it's easier to work on projects that are similar, that have a lot of overlapping membership. But those projects aren't necessarily going to enhance your personal exposure to different units of the organization, different leaders of the organization, or generate your own social capital that's unique and diverse from the people kind of closely surrounding you. So one part of this is thinking about, to some degree, yes, you have to have your key core projects that maybe have a lot of similarity around you in terms of what you're working on, but to the extent that you can identify some that are, maybe focused on a different geographic region, working on a different subsidiary problem, on applying something you're learning in one setting to maybe a very different project or product in your organization, lending those skills there. Even as like a secondary member, you're going to learn a lot more and build better social capital as a result. So you have to be thinking about mapping your own portfolio of projects in that way. You have to know yourself, what you're trying to accomplish, and you might have to force yourself out of your comfort zone to push yourself on some of those projects that are a little more challenging. But you also need to force yourself to effectively manage the influence processes that are going to come along with this and some of those sort of interdependent conflicts that are going to occur across projects. Create your own expectations. You have to protect yourself. You need to be careful that you don't get in a situation where you can't deliver and you get a damaged reputation because you've spread yourself too thin or you're not able to give what's required on a project. And it's important in these situations because they're more fluid, dynamic. There aren't sort of sometimes the formal mentorship relationships you might have in a traditional organization. You have to be able to document and kind of sell your progress. People need to know what you have to offer so that you get invited and placed on prime projects. So all of those kinds of political influence processes become more vital in this kind of team-based situation and a situation of multiple team membership. Now, if you're a leader, some of these things aren't going to sound very unfamiliar because you still have to think about launching your team well. Trust and familiarity become even more important in these environments because there's so much churn and rotation, and because there's that idea of underbounding where people don't necessarily feel the same connection and loyalty and identification with any given team. Part of that is spending time kind of sharing, finding those points of similarity, making sure there's an opportunity for people to talk to each other and feel a sense of interpersonal connection. Because otherwise, when people are switching and there's the rapid switching and the cost of switching across contexts, people tend to get a little bit more focused on just getting the work done. And then what we see is the relationship development in the team suffers, and all the attendant problems can come along with that in terms of inability to have effective conflict resolution. Um, Maybe people's commitment wanes, and if they have the choice to change their attention, the attention to your project may wane, and you may not actually get your project done on time or with the quality you need. A booster shot, you have to do this again and again and again, because there will be more turnover. There will be more churn in teams and team-based organizations. And if the teaming is not even a formal team that stands for an ongoing period of time, but is a short-term collaboration, you really have to kind of work these processes of quick development of trust, finding points of commonality and similarity, and developing that sense of connectedness and entitativity for the team rapidly, as fast as you can. And you have to understand what's happening in your team and other people's teams. It's why your own personal network as a team leader becomes even more essential, because you need to have network ties with the teams that your members are on, so that you can engage in some negotiation and making sure that when you need people's attention and mind share to your team, that it's happening. There's a lot of situations in organizations where there'll be those temporal crossing points I talked about, where there's a quarter end or some major, product introduction cycle in an industry where many teams have the same kind of crunch time. And you will have, extra challenges there when you have members of your team facing the same kinds of temporal challenges from multiple teams. And so your ability to negotiate their time and attention is going to be really paramount to the performance of your team. And then, of course, the reflection on you as a leader. There are things that matter really all the time, but I think become even more vital is this idea of understanding the network connections, understanding the transactive memory, supporting the development of transactive memory in your team so you rapidly know who knows what and who to go to quickly. Team members, if they're moving across teams, it's going to be harder to develop transactive memory system. So some interventions like we talked about in week 2 for doing that, supporting the development of that transactive memory system will enhance the efficiency of knowledge applications inside your team. They're not going to have the time to be together in one team, stable and bounded over time to develop that. So you're going to have to use other techniques and methods to support that. And then, per Amy Edmondson's kind of edicts in the teaming book, you really have to have a teaming learning environment. This means you have to figure out how to create an environment of psychological safety, how to try small experiments and value failures that are intentional failures to learn, and ultimately try to figure out ways to capture learning and embed it into ongoing teamwork. Learning tends to get crowded out again because people are worried about switching costs, and so one of the prime reasons for having a team-based organization is to have learning and knowledge transfer happen faster across the organization. But paradoxically, those stressful attention problems that happen in multiple team systems can actually reduce the capability in a team to learn. So, some of this also is understanding, that there are personality differences. Some people are just more effective and more comfortable at switching, at the idea of multitasking, and are better at communication. So to the extent that you can identify those people, those are some of the people you want to be recruiting into your organization and trying to staff on your own teams, because they're likely to perform better in these kinds of dynamic, changing environments. So those are just a few things to keep in mind from yourself as an individual working in a team-based organization and in a multiple team membership situation, and your role, if you're thinking about being a team leader, both forming and launching teams, but also managing teams in an ongoing basis where your team members are going to be pulled across multiple teams.